But that makes it very clear. And I can also envision how the precise structure of these intermediate goals would vary depending on what sort of adaptation one is pursuing. And I do remember from our previous episodes that fat loss itself is not an adaptation. It is a byproduct of other adaptation. So I just want to make sure that you know that I was paying attention. It's committed to memory.
Absolutely.
Some goals, such as fat loss, are very quantifiable, and yet they might not be linear, right? It's hard to know. The assumption is if you ingest, X fewer calories than are required per day, then you'll lose X amount of weight, some percentage from body fat. I think that cues up the idea that we need to build some flexibility into our thinking about these intermediate goals in order to just make sure that dopamine system isn't tethered to exact numbers, because after all, a reduction in 2% body fat, for instance, is really desired to achieve a different sort of overall body composition or recomposition. I don't know, by the way, that that's my exact goal. I think one of my goals is to be able to run a mile faster. And I'm sort of haunted by this experience of wanting to run cross country in college and trying to walk on. We weren't a Division I school, but the threshold for being considered for the team was you had to run a sub 10-minute 2-mile, which turns out to be very, very fast.
That's really hard. Yeah.
I did not do that. I didn't even come close. Yeah. And I don't think that I could reasonably do that now. I'm not interested in committing to the kind of training required. The sacrifice isn't meaningful enough for me.
Fair and honest. Case.
But lowering one's mile, time to run a mile by, 10%, seems like a reasonable goal across 6 months.
Sure.
Great. So in the case of a goal like that, clearly there are specific training programs, but this raises the issue of what if I have other goals as well? And at what point do people having multiple goals start to set up collisions between goals? How do we know whether or not something is reasonable, not just on its own, but because of the other things that one has structured into their program? So being able to reduce a mile time by 10% in 6 months, okay, maybe that's doable, maybe it's not. You can tell me. But also being able to, double the amount that they can do for single repetition leg extension for that matter. At the same time, those seem like incompatible goals.
Right. So a couple of things. Number one, the more specific and precise you can be with a single goal, the faster you will get there, generally. So in theory, if you had one thing you wanted to achieve, the best way to go about it is to focus on that. Give it the most priority. That doesn't mean you can't do anything else along the way. You can, but you would want to focus on that. The more additional goals you bring in, the more distraction you're creating for that primary goal. Depending on what those goals are, you can actually do them at the same time. Some other combinations are less effective. Think about it like this. We went through those 9 adaptations, and we went through them in a specific order on purpose. The closer those adaptations are together in that list, the more compatible they are to training each other. The further away, they become more challenging. So just to give a few examples, if you wanted to improve your speed and power, you could basically train those simultaneously. They would not interfere with each other at all. In fact, since power is speed times force, it would be complementary. If you just walk down the line from there to strength, hey, same thing. If you get faster, that's going to aid in strength because force is mass times acceleration. So if you improve acceleration, you're contributing to strength. Same thing with power. So speed, power, and strength are generally very complementary. You can absolutely train all 3 of those goals at the same time and have no issues. Getting into hypertrophy, now we've got a little bit of distinction. If you're going to train strength and hypertrophy, as we talked about in that episode, at the base, those are going to be complementary. You add on some muscle, you're going to get stronger. You start training for strength, it's probably going to help you add on some muscle mass. As you get to the end of that spectrum, the overlap between the two starts to go away, such that if you truly wanted to maximize strength above everything else, if you continue to train for hypertrophy as well, that's going to take too many resources out of your recovery bin, and you won't be able to do that. The inverse would also be the same, right? If you're training to maximize strength, you wouldn't be able to put enough volume on to get sufficient hypertrophy. So If you wanted to then combine speed with hypertrophy, you're going farther away from each other, which means there's going to be more and more distraction. So the hypertrophy training would cause a ton of fatigue. You wouldn't be able to go at max speed for your speed or power strength. So you're going to be compromising those results. Now, speed training won't compromise your hypertrophy training because it's non-fatiguing, right? And so, boom, here we have a little bit of an interference effect one way, but probably not the other. Let's move down the spectrum one more time and get into endurance. We won't go through all of these things, but you're getting the idea here. Oh, a little bit of a high-intensity intervals? Okay, cool. Now, would that compromise my speed, power, or strength? Probably, because there's a little bit of residual fatigue. If the volume was low enough, then you'd be fine. All you're worried about there is not necessarily like some sort of cellular mechanism. It's just simple fatigue. It is amount of energy expenditure versus is that compromising my recovery to come back? Would those first 3 or 4 of those, speed, power, strength, interfere with your ability to elevate your anaerobic capacity? Probably not. Almost surely. In fact, if you look at any of the literature on endurance training, you will see that speed, power, and strength almost always improve endurance, right? Endurance training added on top of strength can be detrimental, can have a neutral effect, but generally doesn't help one get stronger by adding additional conditioning unless you're so unfit you can't get through the volume needed in the strength training, right? One more example here so we don't drag this out too far. In the case of something like I want to lose fat, well, hey, we don't have to worry about interference. It doesn't really matter. If you're fatigued for your hypertrophy session, not a big deal. We're just trying to get some work done. If your hypertrophy session fatigued you from your conditioning, it's cool because you got the work done. So you don't have to worry about it so much. So it really kind of depends on the actual goal. And what you want to pay attention to is actually what are the chances of overlap, which means like what are the adaptations you get physiologically that cross over from one to the other, and then what are the ones that are actually going to start interfering. In fact, I have in my class, I have this giant matrix chart of interference effect going from adaptations through a whole bunch of systems, everything from like handling pH to lymphatic drainage to bone mineral density, etc. And you can walk through these whole things and say which ones actually have a positive effect, which ones have a massive positive effect, and then which ones actually have a little bit of an interference. And perhaps if you guys are nice enough, we could throw that into a newsletter or something, some PDF or something.
I think that would be immensely valuable. I think some of that more extensive information, when it's laid out in grid form like that,
it's easier
really
to
useful.
contend
So
with, yeah.
We should do, well, now we've said it. So
I didn't say I would do it. I said perhaps.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's a terrific idea. The idea that items closer on to each other on the list of those 9 different adaptations are going to be easier to achieve in parallel than items further apart makes perfect sense. And what I heard was that there's a few caveats that might seem minor, but they're actually quite important, such as anything that is relatively low intensity and doesn't impede recovery can probably be included as a parallel goal. So some speed work in conjunction with some long duration cardio work,
No
for instance,
problem.
even though we're talking about number 2 on that list and number 9 on that list.
In that case, the long duration endurance, even if it's low intensity, may actually interfere with the speed if the volume gets too high. If you're talking about, I went on a 30-minute jog, for most people that it's totally fine. What we're really talking about here is when the miles start piling up or the time really starts getting there in combination with some of the factors we've talked about earlier, which is exercise choice. So more eccentric landing-based exercise choices, running, for example, is more likely to interfere than cycling, right? Because you're not landing. Swimming is low impact. So if you're going to do those things, you can hedge your bets a little bit by choosing an exercise choice that is less impactful. Again, if we're literally, because there's oftentimes confusing here, was like, oh, don't do 10 minutes on the treadmill before you lift. You're going to cut, whoa, like time out. A warm-up is fine. We're really talking about probably more than 30 plus minutes at higher than 60% heart rate, like random number, something like that. Depends on the person, etc. But it has to be a decent chunk. Again, you can actually fix that by then just consuming calories. You can also fix that by making sure everything else in the hidden invisible stressor bucket is improved. So this is like one of our tricks that we'll get into when we get into recovery, is you don't necessarily need to reduce your training if you just ramp up your recovery.
I'd like to take a brief break and acknowledge our sponsor, Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens is a vitamin, mineral, probiotic, and adaptogen drink designed to help you meet all of your foundational nutritional needs. I've been taking Athletic Greens daily since 2012, so I'm delighted that they're a sponsor of this podcast. The reason I started taking Athletic Greens and the reason I still take Athletic Greens once or twice a day is that it helps me meet all of my foundational nutritional needs. That is, it covers my vitamins, my minerals, and the probiotics are especially important to me. Athletic Greens also contains adaptogens, which are critical for recovering from stress, from exercise, from work, or just general life. If you'd like to try Athletic Greens, you can go to athleticgreens.com/Huberman to claim a special offer. They'll give you 5 free travel packs, and they'll give you a year's supply of vitamin D3K2. Again, if you'd like to try Athletic Greens, go to athleticgreens.com/Huberman to claim the special offer. I'm going to take the liberty of assuming that most people fall into one of either 3 bins in terms of their goals. Again, most people. Certainly there are going to be people that lie outside these bins. I think if you polled 100 people or 100,000 or 1 million people as to what their major goals were in working out, they'd say, as you so nicely listed out before, aesthetic changes, functionality, and longevity. But that 1 in 3 really kind of sit higher than most people would like to perhaps even admit. They want to look good, which usually means they want to lose some fat, gain some muscle in specific places. I realize there are folks out there who want to gain a lot of muscle, just muscle everywhere. But I think most people would like to have a little more shape here or a little more muscle there to either balance out their aesthetic or to accentuate certain parts of their physique. And they would probably like to shave off some subcutaneous fat, although there are those exceptionally lean people out there, and they exist too. I think it would be gain muscle in specific places, lose fat, and do it in a way that also provides some boost to their health span and longevity. I would say that might even be 50% of people out there. Again, I'm taking the liberty of guesstimating. Another bin I would venture is interested in getting stronger and putting on more muscle. Certainly there are a number of people that are interested in doing that. And that could even be more muscle all over or more muscle with some accentuation to certain areas where they happen to be weaker or less developed, as it were. And then the third bin would be people that really enjoy cardiovascular work. Oh, I should say the second bin probably care about their longevity also, but it's not really foremost. Like, yeah, I feel great now and I'll live to be whatever, but I only want to do it if I get that much muscle, right? We know these kinds of folks. I run a
poll in my class every year when I ask, like, what you guys all lift? And of course, like, I make them put their hand up. I'm like, you guys are in my class. You're going to put your hand up, let you lift weights. And then I ask them, like, why do you train? And like long-term health is like on the list. And they all I'm like, any of you that selected health are liars. Like, you're 20 to 25. You are not exercising for health. You are exercising because you want to look a certain way or get stronger. Once you get past that undergraduate age, though, the actual desire to live longer and better actually becomes pretty real.
Yeah, I think that there are people who want to feel better. They know that Definitely. Exercise and the results from exercise can make them feel better. But yeah, that second bin tends to be more focused on the aesthetic change, it seems, or being strong. And then the third category, I think, are people, I know a lot of folks like this, who really enjoy what are normally considered endurance type activities. And here, I just want to highlight again what you so beautifully illustrated in previous episodes, that you can gain a lot of endurance even using weights or machines. It just depends on how you use them, right?
Absolutely.
It's not about the exercise, about how you perform them, and et cetera. And you, again, beautifully provided all those details as to how to create endurance regardless of equipment standards, et cetera. But that third category seem to be people who enjoy running, cycling, swimming, hiking, dancing, activities that they can do for long periods of time that often will involve some sort of skill that is based on improving motor patterns. So maybe not so much stride, but certainly for people that really love tennis.
Yeah.
People that love a sport like golf, right? They want to be able to not just walk, they want to walk the 18 holes. They want to have a great golf swing, et cetera. I'm not a golf player, so forgive me if my nomenclature is off.
Golfer,
so I would say there are 3
golfer.
Yeah, golfer.
You don't play golf.
Oh, got it. You don't play golf.
Well, you play golf. You wouldn't call a golf player.
I played miniature golf a few times. And that's about it. Although Stanford does have a beautiful golf course. I'm told I should learn how to play golf.
I'll come up and play it for you if you want. You come up, I'll play it. I'll tell you how it looks. Get me on that
almost
course.
See it from my lab. So category 1, I think, is a significant fraction of people.
Yeah.
So as we lay out these different ways to assess goals, and as we approach the structure of a program, as you'll tell us, if we could perhaps touch back to those every once in a while, I'm taking the liberty of assuming that we will net about 80 to 90% of people out there. Again, those categories being people who want to lose some fat, maybe build some muscle in specific areas on their body, and really want to be healthy. They want to feel great, and they want to have a long health span, aka end lifespan. They want to live a long time feeling great. Second category, people who want to build more muscle and strength. Sure, they don't want to damage their health, but that's not their main focus. Their main focus is on building muscle and strength. And then that third category of people who really want to do more endurance type work, feel great and strong doing it, but not because they can, carry heavy weights while they're doing it, but rather they can feel vital and they can push harder for longer, and maybe even translate that to some of the more recreational type activities or sports like tennis and things that are more long duration, playing soccer, maybe even softball or things of that sort.
Yeah, surfing, swimming, all
so
that
those
stuff. 3
categories, maybe we could call those bin A, B, and C for sake of today's discussion. I think if you're willing to embrace
I love it.
I think that will be informative toward our listeners in a way that simply not assuming what people's different goals are might not be able to accomplish. Said differently, hopefully by doing that, people will derive a lot more from the description of the program that you're going to give us.
Love it.
Now I am certain that I want to let you return to your list of the 5 things that people need to consider when establishing a exercise program.
Yeah, great. Let's do that. I also do want to acknowledge a point you've brought up acutely. Exercise doesn't mean just lifting weights. That's my background. That's what I spend my time on. So I sort of default to examples in that category, but it doesn't have to be that. You've articulated plenty of other ways where you can get amazing forms of exercise that have nothing to do with lifting weights. So for those folks in what was it, bin C or 3? I can't remember.
C. We go A is gain muscle, lose fat, be healthy now and forever.
Right.
Bin B is get stronger, gain muscle, don't damage your health, but not really focus on health in the immediate term. And then bin C is want to play or do endurance type activities and quote unquote feel strong doing it. So have more vigor to be able to do that longer and maybe with more attention to skill, et cetera. And of course, also want to improve their health.
What you've effectively done is you've given us 3 different avatars with 3 different goals, right? So the next step for each person or group is going to be to identify their defenders. But before we get that, we got to close the loop on this SMART thing. So in each case, they have either chosen that goal based on their personal preference, or perhaps they did our fitness testing protocol and realized they need to gain strength. So whether the reason they chose to be in buckets B or A or C was because of our protocol or it's just personal preference, it really doesn't matter. They still want to go through this process of laying out their goals and making sure that, again, they are specific, right? So let's go through bin C, which is a great one. So you want to have more energy and you want to feel stronger when you're doing your kiteboarding. You want to feel stronger when you finish your round of tennis, round of golf, game of tennis. Okay, great. That's a different strength. Absolutely. See, I know what you're saying though. Amazing. So that goal needs to be specific to that, right? So it would be hard to make a goal like, I want to feel better at the end of my round. Boy, that depends on too many other factors. A better goal would be something like this. I want to be able to run this 2-mile loop that I do around my neighborhood, and I want to do it and have a lower heart rate at the end. Or I want to be able to get my heart rate recovery back faster. Amazing. That will probably align with you feeling quote unquote stronger with it, right? So I did the same course and either I can do it at the same speed and it's not nearly as hard, or I can go faster, whichever one, it doesn't matter. But that would be an example of a specific goal. The other buckets you laid out kind of already have specific goals, like I want to get stronger. Well, that's going to be the goal. The other one is going to be, I want to lose some fat. Okay, that's kind of, the goal is sort of implicit in that. It's the other people where you're just like, I don't really care about that. I just want to be able to surf the great waves and then not feel exhausted afterwards. All right, cool. Well, then you still should pick a metric that is not that activity maybe, because it won't be within your control depending on the waves and the temperature and all this stuff, that you can use as a proxy to say, if I were to do something that represented me feeling probably better when I surf, what would that be? And it's not perfect, but it would be still as specific as you could get. You still want to make sure it's measurable. Again, in this example might be something like you're going to go to the pool and time how long it takes you to swim 800 meters or something, right? It's attainable, and then you'll set a goal that's realistic and timely. I'm going to improve by 5% in the next 2 months. Okay, cool. That probably falls in the realm. And then you're making the assumption that if you did that, you'll probably feel better when you go out to do your primary activity, which is, say, surf. The reality of it is, every time we work with an actual athlete, that's what we do. Athletes don't come to us to lift weights. They don't come to us to get stronger. They come to us because they want to play better and they want to stay on the field more. What we're trying to convince them of is, if you do this thing in the gym, then that should translate into you being better at your sport, recovering faster, being less injured. But it's still just a proxy. And so that's all you're doing with these other non-specific goals, especially when they're performance-based goals. And we didn't package it that way, but that's really what you talked about for bin C there. It is a performance-based goal. I want to be able to perform when I'm in the field. And my brain, that's a sport. And your brain, it's when you're at yoga class. It's the same thing. Like we've said this earlier in our series, that if you have a body, you're an athlete. I want to prepare your body such that it can do exactly what you want it to do. You then get to have the choice of what you ask it to do. You call it a sport, you call it your Saturday hike with your family, I don't really care. It's the same thing. You get control of your body performing the way you want it to perform, and that's what this whole thing is about. Great. So now that we've covered, I think, as much as we need to regarding assessing and choosing a goal, I want to get back to this idea of identifying your defender. So you really need to think carefully about what is stopping you from hitting those goals. And so you're forecasting a little bit. You're also going back into your own personal history, right? Do you have history of knee pain? Do you have a history of working too much? Do you have a history of a lot of travel? Do you have a history of getting sick a lot? What are these things that are happening that are going to stop you from hitting your goal? A couple of examples I've already laid out, so we don't need to go too much longer here, but in the case of somebody who is in maybe bin A, right, which is, I want to lose some fat, maybe gain a little bit of muscle. Okay, what's stopping you from the strength and conditioning side? Is it the fact that you can't train consistent enough? Is it a fact that when you go to train, you don't know what to do? Is it a fact that when you go to train, you train your ass off and you're not getting results? Okay, great. All three of these different scenarios are going to result in different programs because they have different reasons you're failing. And that is really critical. Instead of just going, I want a fat loss program, and picking one up off the internet, it may not actually be addressing the point of failure for you. So the sooner you can choose your programs based on why you're failing, the sooner you'll start getting results. So you have to run a little bit of a critical analysis there. And it can be something scientific, and it could be a measurement. And it also could just be you thinking about, you've tried this in the past and why didn't it work? Wasn't that interesting? Okay, tell me more about why it wasn't interesting. Oh, I'm not really into machines, and that's all I had. Okay, great. Or I loved it. I loved the gym I was at and I was getting results, but it was so far away. Okay, interesting. Why did you stop before? Why didn't it work? Or if it did work in the past, amazing. Let's go back to something similar, but has your life changed at all? Is there anything different about now than when it worked 3 years ago? Yes, no. If not, maybe we run it right back. If it is, okay, we're going to sort of predict those things. And you want to work, effectively what I'm saying is throughout this entire 10-step process is going to be, you want to make sure that there are the non-negotiables that are in your life that you know are going to be ahead of your fitness program. And you want to work with those things, not against them, right? Because life will win. When it comes to your children, when it comes to your job, life is going to win. You're going to have to give up something. It's going to take some hard work. But we want to fight the right battles for most people, right? Even for our professional athletes. We get this all the time. It's just like they have nothing else to do but train, right? You're like, well, hold on now. They're getting traded. They have agents to deal with. They may not have a contract. They have families. Blah, blah, blah. I think life will get in the way, I promise. And so you want to fight the battles that you can win, not ones that you're going to lose. And so that's really what this game is about. So if the battle is, hey, my job is super hectic. Okay, great. We're going to come up with a different strategy that's more flexible maybe. I'm still going to hold you to the fire. I'm not going to be easier on you, but we're just not going to try to set up a situation where you have to do this workout Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, because you know your job is on the road and you're the provide all the income for your family and your children. Okay, whatever the thing is, right? That's what we really want to identify. So when I say identify your defenders, you need to run a little bit of a critical analysis on this, and a little bit of a tool I'll use for this is a modification of another system I stole from Kenny Kane, which is what we call the quadrant system. So you can imagine everything in your life goes into one of 4 buckets. All right. Now, bucket 1, I'm just going to call business. And this is anything to do with your job, income, sort of all those things. Bucket 2 is relationships. So again, this could be family or love life, like anything that we would call relationships, social connection, purpose, anything right there. Bucket 3 is your fitness. And bucket 4 is your recovery. So one of the first steps we take is we walk through this and we say, all right, you have 10 points total. And you get to distribute these 10 points across the 4 areas. So not 10 each, you get 10 total. And so we walk through and we say, right now, where are you giving your points? And we could do this right now for you if you'd like, or I could make up a scenario. Do you want to do it?
Sure.
Great. So, Andrew, right now in the last month, if you had 10 points total in those 4 categories, where would you be distributing the most points? Which category and how many points would that be?
Business, my work.
Business, work, job, sort of all those things.
Right.
And how many out of 10?
Which doesn't, I should say, ever quite feel like work. Running a laboratory and doing the podcast doesn't ever really feel like work in the traditional sense, but it's career, it's work, it involves relationships, but it certainly doesn't enhance my fitness, except of my vocal cords and recovery. So with those notes there, I would say 4 to 5.
You pick.
5.
5. Fair. That's the most common number. 5, business 5.
Great. Once again, I'm typical, which makes me happy.
You nailed it.
One of the few ways in which I've been accused of being normal. I picked 5 for business.
No kidding. What's the next highest and what's that score?
I do invest in relationships. I would say, does it have to be around, can it be it
has to be a whole
decimal?
integer. Yeah.
A whole integer. 2.
2. All right. We're 7 out of 10 here. So would you say it is fair that you spend roughly 2.5% of your, it's not necessarily time, it's energy, time, focus, sort of all of these things, 2.5 times as much on your business as you do in your relationships?
It varies depending on what's going on. It feels a little skewed in the direction of business. So I might want to adjust to a 4-3 ratio there.
Maybe not.
But I think I'm going to hold to 5,
okay.
2, business relationships, and then just for sake of example, and because this doesn't seem like a exceedingly precise measure, it can have some slop.
Of course.
Okay.
Where would you put fitness and recovery?
I definitely put energy into fitness, so I'm going to give that also a 2.
Yep. Which leaves
1 for recovery.
Great. That, what you just laid out, is, again, the most quintessential split you could have. In fact, you run this game on everyone, they're going to come up with basically the same answer, unless they don't work out or whatever, right? Okay, so a couple of rules here. Recovery must be at minimum half of your fitness allocation. In your case, 2 to 1. You're fine.
I thought you were going to say it has to be half. Like it has to be 5 out of 10 points. In
No.
which case, it doesn't leave much for anything else.
I would like it
Yeah.
to be minimum 20% of the total, which means 2 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and when I say recovery, I don't simply mean muscle. I mean, you need personal time. You need meditation. You need
Sleep.
sleep. You need to go to a concert and get out and see people. And so like whatever the things that give you energy back, right? Some folks that's personal time, some folks that's social time, whatever that means to you, right?
Yeah, I actually get a lot of energy from my work.
Great.
And so that's why some of these numbers are a little bit, you can
Always the case,
kind of
right?
cloak the underlying dynamics.
So here's what we do from this game. We look at that and we say, if that's our split, Andrew, 5, 3, 2, 1.
5, 2, 2, 1.
5, 2,
Sure.
2, 1.
I'd love to be able to put 3 in relationships just because, but then
Cool.
I need 11 out of.
Right. So here's the fun game we play. You're currently at this, and you don't get to add to 11. You have to stay at 10. Your 10 is different than my 10, maybe, right? But 10 is 10. Or just whatever the maximum you can actually do. It's you. So if we went back to our training goal, whatever that goal was for you, and we went back to our defenders, we would look at this score now and say, is 3 out of 10, fitness was 3, right?
Fitness is 2.
2.
So it's 5, 2, 2,
Sorry.
1.
Is 2 out of 10 sufficient to hit that training goal in that time frame you described? And let's say you said, I want to hit a new PR in my mile 6 months from now.
Yeah, for simplicity's sake, and also because it's largely true, I'm going to put myself in what I referred to as bin A earlier.
Great.
Right. My body fat percentage is okay. It's in the range
It's good.
that I would like, but I would like to bring it down a little bit. Probably gain a little bit muscle here and there. Keep or gain some endurance, and certainly, my immediate and long-term health are extremely important to me.
Great. So then the question and the main answer may be yes, that this is the optimal split for you. If it is not, then we have to make a choice. We either alter the goal or the timeline to make it realistic, or we alter our quadrant. And then if we're going to alter our quadrant, the next step is critically important. We need a list of very specific life actions that we're going to take that allows that split to happen. So if you said, for example, I want to put 3 into relationships, great. What specific life actions are you going to take to pull 1 from fitness? You can't pull any from recovery, or 1 from business. And you don't have to actually answer this. It's too personal. I know you don't like making these things about you because
Right, and that's the other reason to do it. And it is a diabolical trick to insist that these be whole integers, because I would have done, like a 4.5 for business and a 2.5 for relationships. But obviously, you write the rules on this, not me.
So you would just walk through that list, okay? And the list could be something like, I promise to not work after 7 p.m. Thursday through Sunday, or whatever the thing is, right? I promise I'm gonna make sure that I don't start work before 8 a.m. or whatever, right? No more trips. Just make those things specific and measurable, not just like I'm going to work less. That's never going to go. What is the very specific life action you're going to take? There's going to be an alarm that goes off Tuesday night at 5 p.m. And no matter what, we at Barbell Shrugged, we used to have a little shirt that was like D3 AT, which is like drop everything and train, which means at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, no matter what's happening, we dropped everything and trained. Because that was like when you start a business and you're going, things just run away from you, right? And it's just sort of like, man, it's not my company, but those guys are like, we are a strength conditioning company and we're not training. So we had to just make this hard rule, and it was just like a little thing that came up, and it was easy to say, drop everything and train, 3 o'clock. There you go.
I like this drop D, E everything, A and blank. Like it could be drop everything and
Correct.
Pick your favorite. No.
Totally. Drop everything and read.
Pick the relevant read. Yeah, absolutely. I really miss reading for pleasure. I would put that under recovery, and potentially
drop everything and breathe.
And
I do that a lot too.
and breathe. You were saying, and breathe. I was saying read.
I said that too.
Yeah, because for me, reading is both recovery and relationship. Because oftentimes in my relationships, I've not insisted. I certainly didn't insist. We've had a format of reading the same book in parallel.
Oh, great.
Yeah, not necessarily side by side, but the same book in parallel and then discussing it. It's a wonderful practice, or listening to the same audiobook.
Yep. It works well. You can drop everything and play. Mm-hmm. You're just going to go do something fun. You're going to play video games. You're going to go play with your kid. You're going to do whatever, play with your dog. Like it doesn't even have to actually be played, but play it to you could signify personal time, right? It doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's I
really like this drop everything and blank category. That you probably shouldn't have more than 2 or 3 of those overall.
Pretty much like 1 to 2 maybe.
Great.
Is where you want to go after that.
So the idea is then to redistribute the numbers on this list, but through a very concrete action. And I like this drop everything and blank because it speaks to the non-negotiable aspect of it.
Has to be. It's life will get pushed.
Right. It's not a fine time to, right.
Correct.
It's not in next year I'm going to.
Correct.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. When you put those things you might as well just don't even put it on your list, right? Because it's not going to happen.
Yeah. You're talking to somebody who loves rules. Because when they are non-negotiable rules, they provide this incredible organizing force for the brain.
Yeah.
It's really a neuroscience thing in my mind.
Totally.
And actually, we did an episode on happiness where you find that once people make a decision, if they eliminate the possibility of other decisions, like literally the hatch is closed, that is it.
Burn the boats.
The rates of subjective happiness, immediate and long-term happiness over time go way, way up.
Yeah.
And so I'm convinced that the nervous system doesn't like to keep the valves on these dopamine circuits open. I actually think it diminishes from the reward component. And there are actually some data on this. Anyway, I don't want to take us off track, but
the last part of this, what we do then is we take that quadrant and we take that list and then you're going to print it physically and you're going to put it in two places. This could actually be on your phone. You don't have to print it. You can screenshot it. It can be the background of your phone. So every time you click on your phone, you immediately see that quadrant. Like it's a very clear reminder of like, what are my priorities today, right? Just a simple little picture. I also like to put it in your place of failure. So for a lot of people, that is like on their laptop or right above their workstation, right? It's like the thing that's going to lose and beat your fitness is your job, typically, right? Or it's on your TV. It's on your Netflix control. No, sorry, Netflix, no offense. But you know what I mean? Like it's whatever the thing is that you fail for. I play too many video games. Great. There. I work too much. Okay, great. And you put it there and you put it also, the last component is it has to also be in the hands of somebody who can hold you accountable, right? Wife, training partner, business partner, whatever. So it's like, hey, Andrew, like you promised you were going to do X yourself. Why are you still here? You committed to this. You got to get out of here. Someone who will like be like, no, it's drop everything and read. It's 8:00. You're supposed to be reading. You got to go. You're going to check back in on that. Check back in every week. Check back in. It doesn't matter every month. And then you can adjust. It's fine. You can always change the system. But that has to now change. You got to print a new one. And now it's a whole new promise you've made to yourself. So you've got to be able to hold yourself accountable to those things. It's got to be flexible enough to where it's realistic. It can't be, I'm not going to work after 6:00 every day. Maybe it's just 3 days a week. Maybe it's on Saturdays, I promise to work for the first 2 hours so I don't work Saturday night or whatever, or the inverse. I'm not going to work Saturday. You get it. You could come up with a million examples here. So that's the system we use to make sure that we have now properly identified where we're going. We found a roadmap to that, and now we know exactly how we're going to stay on track. I have to take this opportunity to add one more thing to our drop everything list, and you gave the example of DEAR, which is maybe drop everything and read, or drop everything and relax, or another example, I have to add a deal, which is drop everything. And this is for you, Lex, love.
Actually, one of the advantages of having a dog or having children is that the drop everything and love is often enforced by the faces of those that you love. They just show up in whatever space you happen to be in.
Especially if you work from home.
I'd like to take a brief break to acknowledge our sponsor, Inside Tracker. Inside Tracker is a personalized nutrition platform that analyzes data from your blood and DNA to help you better understand your body and help you reach your health goals. I've long been a believer in getting regular blood work done for the simple reason that many of the factors that impact your immediate and long-term health and well-being can only be analyzed from a quality blood test. One issue with a lot of blood tests and DNA tests out there, however, is that you get information back about various levels of lipids and hormones and metabolic factors, etc., but you don't know what to do with that information. Inside Tracker makes knowing what to do with all that information exceedingly easy. They have a personalized platform that lets you see what your specific numbers are, of course, but then also what sorts of behavioral do's and don'ts, what sorts of nutritional changes, what sorts of supplementation would allow you to bring those levels into the ranges that are optimal for you. If you'd like to try Inside Tracker, you can visit insidetracker.com/Huberman to get 20% off any of Inside Tracker's plans. Again, that's insidetracker.com/Huberman to get 20% off.
Let's move on to the next one, shall we? Number 3 here is going to be what I call calendar or sort of time frame. So it's going back a little bit and saying you've decided on this goal and you've identified the defenders. Now we need to come up with a realistic time frame for how long it's going to take to accomplish that goal. And when you do that, you need to look at your life schedule. And what I mean by that is, do you have important deadlines coming up? Do you have a holiday? Do you have a trip? Do you have travel? Do your children have something coming up? You need to take all that information, and I literally lay out a calendar, and I write all those dates in a physical calendar first. And the reason I'm suggesting this is you want to work your training backwards around that. As we've been discussing, life will win. If you try to plan a training program that is 5 days a week, 90 minutes a day, and all of a sudden you look 2 weeks from now and you realize you've got a grant deadline and then you've got to take 2 days to go to Austin, it's just foolish. You're going to fail, and then you're going to quit, and you're going to be like, man, again, my training program failed. So you need to figure out what the non-negotiables are in that business quadrant and just not be foolish, all right? So let's imagine you're going to plot out, say, a 12-week training phase, and you've decided on this goal. And then you look and you realize in the middle of this 12-week span, week 5 is really hectic and chaotic. Or you realize that this is a quarter in which something important is due. Maybe we want to either adjust the goal, or what we really do in this step is going on to actually step number 4, which is choose the number of days per week you can exercise and the length in terms of amount of time you can truly afford to train. I would rather you underestimate that than overestimate it. So you look at the calendar, you put all these non-negotiables, the deadlines you cannot move in the calendar, and then you say, look, based on this, realistically, I can conservatively train 3 days a week for 60 minutes total. And that includes the time I walk into the gym, my warm-up, my down-regulation breathing at the end, and then me getting back either in the shower and back. Because really now it's maybe 90 minutes by the time you traveled, you transitioned, you picked back up on work, you showered, you ate, etc. That time just runs away from you, and all of a sudden it was a 2.5 hour thing, even though it was a 45-minute workout. So you really need to figure that thing out. If you're a few weeks in and you realize, oh, actually I have a little more time than I thought, you can always train more. You can do another thing, you can add it. But what you don't want to do is set up a program that is requiring you to do certain exercises on one days or certain styles of training on another, and then you constantly miss one of those days. I thought I could do 4 days a week, but 1 day a week something's getting pulled out. That's just going to keep you off schedule. It's going to make you feel like a failure, and you're going to run into problems with your training. So schedule 3 if you are sure you can get 3, and if there's an extra day, we can always do other fun stuff, all right? So that's really step 3 and 4. Figure out your life events over the course of this time. How many days a week can you train? And then how long in terms of minutes per workout? Notice, we haven't selected a single exercise yet. We haven't worried about how heavy, rest intervals, all those modifiable variables. You don't need to pick those later. First, where are we going? Second, how are we going to get there, which is the quadrant and the identifying of defenders. And then the third is, what are the restrictions I need to place on myself in terms of program design based on how often and how long I can work out? That is going to allow you to go back to some of the previous episodes and go, man, you gave us all kinds of ideas. How do I know which one to choose? This is your answer. You're going to choose based upon the limitations of time and frequency. So if you've already said, let's imagine we're in bucket A or bucket C, it doesn't matter. And you go, look, the most I can afford with where I'm at, with what's going on in my life, is 3 days a week. Well, we automatically know we're going to have to start choosing a training style that's limited to 3 days a week. Don't even worry about the 4 or 5 day stuff. Those are off the table. And now we've placed restrictions. It kind of goes back to that concept of, I think it's one of your podcast guests, Jocko, right? It's just like, hey, structure gives us actually some freedom. So by creating some restrictions here, we're a little more free to go, I only actually have to choose between A and B, rather than sitting down and going, man, I'm 20 hours into this exercise podcast thing, and there's so many options which one to pick. Well, you create a little bit of restriction, and now it's easier to go, oh, my only option is A or B. And there we go.
So that's number 4.
That's 3 and 4. At that point, once we're good there, now what you want to do is go to step number 5, which is actually select your exercises or your movements. And this can be as simple as selecting like a kettlebell swing or running or swimming. It could be your entire exercise mode. And what you want to do with exercise selection here is make sure that you're balancing those exercises across the whole week, not within necessarily every workout. So if you have 4 days a week, 5 days a week, you want to look at the exercise selection and say, okay, I need to have somewhat of a reasonable balance between movement patterns or muscle groups or front and back, side to side, however you're thinking of it, just across that week, right? So again, say we're on that 3-day program and we're in either of the buckets, any of the buckets really, and we say, okay, great. Maybe it's not ideal if all I select is cycling every day. That's not a lot of balance. I don't notice there's no upper body work there. There's no torso work. There's no other positions. So maybe I'm going to really focus on cycling. So I will do only cycling 2 days a week. But that third day, I need to pick something for the other movement areas. And that's going to make sure you stay in a reasonable balance. If you have an exercise that you like, great. If you have exercise you have access to. Again, maybe the gym is a giant pain in the ass. And so you can say, look, it's too far away. The closest one is 45 minutes there and back. So maybe I'm going to restrict myself to only kettlebell and bands and running because I can do those in my house. Awesome. We've actually created some freedom because we gave ourselves some restriction. And now we just have to figure out how am I going to give some movement patterns somewhat balanced across my 3 days. So really, when it comes to exercise choice, it is selecting the patterns that you know how to execute, giving yourself, again, somewhat of a balance between the muscles and the joints and the movement patterns, making sure that you are specifically targeting any muscle group or movement that you want. So making sure you want to improve muscle size in your glutes, you better make sure some of the exercises you're doing, at least 1 day a week, you feel it in your actual glutes. So you can check that box. It doesn't have to be every exercise. It probably shouldn't. It doesn't even have to be every single day. But make sure it's checked off somewhere on that list. And the last one is there a strategy in which you can progress it? So if you're like, I'm just going to do body weight exercises. Okay, great. Well, how are you going to progress those? In the case of like body weight, it's really hard to add load. Maybe you can put a weight vest on or something, but then maybe you don't have that, or that's an extra thing, or that can only go so far. So what's my progression strategy going to be? Well, in this case, maybe you just increase the complexity by going from 2 legs, like say a body weight squat, to a single leg squat. Or you just increase repetitions, or you increase time you're going to hold it. Whatever. My point is your progression strategy will be based upon the restrictions that you place based on availability and things like that. The last thing I would recommend here in terms of exercise progression, to make sure that you can continue to do these things while lowering your risk of injury, both in the short term and long term, is to progress your exercise complexity in this fashion. So make sure, number one, you can do the exercise properly with assistance. So let's imagine a scenario where we're going to try to squat. So put your hands on a bench or something like that. Now, can you execute that squat perfectly with assistance? So you're holding on to something. Okay, great. If you can't, then don't progress past that. Don't go now do a barbell back squat if you can't do it correctly when you had assistance. But let's assume most people can do that. Okay, great. Now you can move on to the next step, which is, can you do it well without assistance? So this would be body weight only. Check. Cool. We're good there. Okay, now you can go ahead and move on. Can you do it well with an added eccentric load? So in this particular case, if we're learning to squat, we can do it well when I hold on to something. That's great. Okay, now I can do it well with just my body weight. Now if I put a little bit of weight on, whether it's a kettlebell in the front like a goblet squat or dumbbells to the side or whatever you want to do, can I lower it and go all the way down and stay in perfect position? If you can do that, great. You're allowed to go to the next step, which is, can you hold it isometrically? So can you go all the way down and then hold that bottom position? What you don't want to do is start adding load or speed or fatigue if you're going down to the bottom position of the movement and you are out of control. We really want to avoid this. So I want you to show me you can go down and you can lower the weight under control. You can hold it in that position under control. If we're clear there, now we can add the concentric portion, right? You can now go ahead, you can lower it, you can hold that position of most danger, and now you can move up at whatever speed we want. We are all good there. Once you can show me those things, you can add the last 2 steps, which are now speed, if you choose to, and the last one, which is fatigue, right? I would really discourage people from doing exercises to fatigue, especially with a moderate or high load, unless you can promise me you can do these first 6 steps. If you can basically go hog wild with your training, and your chances of injury are very low. Again, both acute injury as well as long-term injury, which is just sort of like my joints ache and all of a sudden my shoulder hurts and, things like that. That's really what I'm looking for. And once you're clear there, you can train pretty hard.